Alright, in this video we are going to practice adding and subtracting mixed numbers. I'm actually going to do 6 problems total, 3 for adding mixed numbers and then 3 for subtracting mixed numbers. The TEK that goes with this one is 5.4H, adding and subtracting rational numbers. Alright, so on our adding mixed numbers, first thing we have to do is find a common denominator for our fractions. So the quickest way to do that is just to multiply the two denominators. Now that will work fine every single time, but sometimes you can find a little easier way. This one though, it's just as well to multiply both by one another, and so we end up with 15 as our common denominator. Alright, whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator as well. So on this one I'm going to get 5, and 2 times 3 is 6, 6/15ths, plus 4, 1 times 5 is 5, and 5/15ths. Alright, then I'm just simply going to do the addition. I'm going to add my whole numbers first. 5 plus 4 is 9. And then add my fractions. 6 plus 5 is 11 over 15. And this is a nice problem because I don't have to do any simplification. This is in its simplest form because both 11 and 15, neither one can be divided by any common factors. Alright, let's go on to number 2. Number 2 is going to have actually the same set of denominators, so I've got 3 and 5 again, so I'm just going to multiply the denominators together to get my common denominator of 15 again. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So 1 and 2/3 becomes 1 and 10/15ths, and 4 and 4/5 becomes 4 and 12/15ths. Then I'm going to do my addition, whole numbers first. 1 plus 4 is 5. 10 plus 12 gives me 22/15ths. Now in this one I've got an improper fraction, so I can't leave it this way. I have to change this and make the fraction proper. So I've got two options when I'm doing this. The first thing I can do is, if I have good number sense and I know that I need to pull out one whole, I can just subtract 15 over 15 from this fraction, because this is my one whole that I'm pulling out. And so this becomes 7 over 15, and then I add this one whole to the 5. So it becomes 6 and 7/15ths. Now that's a little too confusing. The other thing you can do is you just do the division. So 22 divided by 15. 15 goes into 22 one time. 1 times 15 is 15. Regroup this. 12 minus 5 is 7. 1 minus 1 is 0. And so my remainder is 1 and 7/15ths, which is what I would get here as well. This is just, if I'm not quite comfortable with this yet, then I can do the division. And then I simply add that 1 to the 5, just like I did. So I get 6 and 7/15ths. Alright, go and do number 3. Actually, let's skip number 3. No, that's fine. Let's do number 3. So again, I'm just going to multiply the denominators by one another to get a common denominator of 10. Whatever I do to the denominator, I need to also do to the numerator. So my 3 and 1/2 becomes 3 and 5/10ths, and my 5 and 4/5 becomes 5 and 8/10ths. Then I do my addition. Whole numbers first. 3 plus 5 is 8. 5/10ths plus 8/10ths is going to give me 13/10ths. And again, I've got an improper fraction here, so I can't leave it as improper. So I can either, I'm going to do some squigglies to kind of keep this separate. I can either subtract 10 over 10 to get my one whole, and then add it back to the 8. So that would give me 9 and 3/10ths. Or I can do the division and say 13 divided by 10. 10 goes into 13 one time. 1 times 10 is 10. 13 minus 10 is 3. And so I get 1 and 3/10ths as my answer, which I would then add back to my 8. But I'm going to get 9 and 3/10ths. Alright, let's switch gears and go ahead and do some subtraction on the other side. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do number 1 and number 4 and number 6. And I'm going to do those because I believe all 3 of those are going to require some regrouping. Well, I'll take it back. Number 4 is not. Let me find another one that requires regrouping. Let's do number 8. I think I'll have to regroup there. Alright, so let's start with number 1. So just like with addition, I've got to find a common denominator. So I'm just going to multiply the denominators to get a common denominator of 6. Then whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So 7 and 1/2 becomes 7 and 3/6. And 3 and 2/3 becomes 3 and 4/6. So I cannot subtract 4 from 3. So I'm going to have to regroup. And the way that I do that is I regroup from my whole number. So my 7 becomes a 6. And then that one whole that I've pulled out in this problem is going to be 6 over 6, because that's what one whole would be if I've got 6 as a denominator. I add that into my fraction. So 6 over 6 plus 3 over 6. It's not a good addition symbol. And so then my 3 over 6 becomes 9 over 6. So now 7 and 3/6 has become 6 and 9/6. Now that I've done that, I can do the subtraction. So 6 minus 3 gives me 3. 9/6 minus 4/6 gives me 5/6. And that's my answer. All right, let's look down at number 6. So let me keep that in the frame. Okay. Now, number 6, when I find my common denominator, I can multiply the denominators together. That is one option. But the other thing I can do is I can think about my factors for 20 and 4 and see if there's something that's a little bit smaller, because if I do 10 times 4 and 4 times 10, I'm going to end up with 40 as a denominator, which that's a pretty big number. But if I think about my factors of 10, I've got 10, 20, 30, 40. And I think about my factors of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. I've got 20 as a common. So my 20 can be a common denominator because it's a common factor between the two. So to get there, I multiply 10 times 2 and 4 times 5. And then I'm simply going to do that to the numerators as well. So my 5 and 4/10 becomes 5 and 8/20, and my 4 and 3/4 becomes 4 and 15/20. Now again, I have to regroup because I cannot subtract 15 from 8. So my 5 becomes a 4. I'm going to add 20 over 20. I'm going to add that here to give me 28 over 20, and that becomes my new fraction. So now I've got 4 and 28/20 minus 4 and 15/20. So 4 minus 4 gives me 0, so I'm just going to leave that whole number spot blank. And then 28 minus 15 is going to give me 13/20, and that's my answer, because I cannot simplify that. All right, we'll do number 8 as our last example problem. I'm going to multiply the denominators by one another. So 5 times 3 to give me a common denominator of 15 between the two. Whatever I do to the denominator, I have to do to the numerator. So 4 times 3 gives me 12, and so 7 and 4/5 becomes 7 and 12/15. 4 and 2/3 becomes 4 and 10/15. Oh man, I don't have to regroup on this one. Oh well. I'll just do the subtraction. So 7 minus 4 gives me 3. I'll start with my whole numbers. And then 12/15 minus 10/15 gives me 2/15.